Okay, so today we're talking to Spike Webb. Spike is the author of Mad, Bad and Dangerous, the book of Drummer's Tales, and more recently he's the author of Take Cover, all about his experiences as a cover support teacher. Spike has an interesting story. Spike's first book, Mad, Bad and Dangerous, was published traditionally, so he went down the route of finding an agent and eventually a publisher. But for Take Cover, he has decided to go down the route of trying the self-publishing model. So we discuss what his decision behind doing that. We also discuss how he managed to find an agent for Mad, Bad and Dangerous, as well as eventually a publisher. We also talk a little bit about the writing process for that and how it was that he went about tackling the subject of cover support teaching for his latest book. One of the things we talk about in this discussion is the idea of when you decide to self-publish, how much you should go about doing something yourself versus finding a self-publishing company. Now, I do want to add that as part of this, we talk about what disadvantage you may be experiencing if you go down the route of using a self-publishing company. I just want to clarify, because we touch upon it very, very briefly. The problem isn't that all self-publishing companies are a bad idea. All self-publishing companies are going to take your book and run, and they're going to get as much money out of you as they can, and so on and so forth. The issue is that you have to bear in mind is it's worth reading the small print. It's worth finding out what are you getting for your money. Are you still going to be doing a lot of this yourself, or will they really be helping you along the way? And most importantly, when you have that finished product at the end, when you have that, when you have maybe you've got a PDF file that can be printed into a book, or you have an EPUB file, are they going to make those raw files available to you so you can take them to another place very easily and publish with someone else if you decide that you want to take your custom elsewhere? Or are there going to be restrictions on that? So that's something to just be mindful of. We're not saying that every self-publishing company is going to give you a raw deal. It's just worth approaching it the same way that you would any kind of contract that you may have, for example, with a traditional publisher. Okay, so with that said, let's check it out. Okay, welcome, Spike.
Thank you.
How you doing? You okay?
Yes, fine, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Congratulations on the release of your latest book.
Thanks very much.
Take Cover.
Thank you.
Yeah. How's it going so far?
It's been out for a couple of weeks, I suppose, maybe 3 weeks, and the sales are going up pretty well every day by the looks of it. So it's going well. I've got some very nice reactions from people on the internet and on my phone, etc. But some really nice things being said by people who wouldn't necessarily say those things. So it's a really nice response. So I'm
Good.
pleased
Yeah.
with that. It seems to have made a lot of people laugh and moved some people as well, which is nice to know.
Yeah. I mean that's the biggie for me when I read it is, and I've said this many times.
Yeah.
It is one of those books, and for me, it's a rarity that there's not many authors that I read that I read their stuff and I'm actually laughing out loud.
Yeah.
You watch a movie, you watch a comedy film, you see a stand-up comedian, you're really laughing out loud. With books, you might be laughing along inside. This was one that actually had me laughing out loud, and I don't know if I've had that since Terry Pratchett.
Oh, really?
Obviously, it's a very, very different. It's a very different book. But if anyone says to me in the past, they say, "Do you like comedy books?" I say, "Well, I like Terry Pratchett. He makes me laugh."
Yeah.
But this genuinely made me laugh. Right now, we've got loads to cover in this, so we'll crack on. What I wanted to start with, though, if it's okay, is if you just give us a bit of a background. Obviously, I've done an introduction for you.
Yeah.
But I think really that there's so much that's interesting about your story. So you are just to sort of go over it quickly myself. You're a drummer.
Yeah.
Rock and roll drummer, dream to being a pop star. You've done a lot of writing in your time. There's another book that you've published that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing for me, or the most interesting things about your story, is that your first book, Mad, Bad and Dangerous, was traditionally published,
Yeah.
and you've moved on over time to the self-publishing model,
Yes.
which is really interesting. So let's start right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Tell me who you are. Obviously, I know you, but people listening don't. Who you are, how you got involved. How did you get involved in doing that first book, Mad, Bad, and Dangerous?
Well, that was really a pure coincidence. I was talking to a drummer friend of mine called Vaughan Rance in a music bar called The Horns in Watford. And we were chatting away about what it's like to be a drummer. And we were sort of having a bit of a moan, really. You know, why would we keep being told to get out of the way and to move, you know, and shut up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And as of
Sit
course,
down, stop getting off your stool.
yeah, stay where you are. No, get out of the way. Do you need that symbol? It's in the way.
Does it have to be that loud?
Yeah. Oh, that one. Yeah. And as the course of the evening continued, we kept going up to each other from our various groups of pals and saying, and another thing, you know. So it was a bit like that. And then he said towards the end, look, you know, we should write a book. We should get as many drummers in it as possible. We'll call it Tales from the High Chair. And I came up with the second byline, which would be Tales from the High Chair, everything drummers wanted to complain about but couldn't be asked. And he, so that was the working title. But the thing is, we didn't bump into each other for quite a long time, and I just went ahead and started doing it on my own. And of course, at the time, I was working as a copywriter for an agency in London, and I was sitting there one day. I didn't have a great deal to do that particular day, and I was writing a story about myself because I didn't know any, you know, particularly famous drummers. I had a friend of mine called John Lingwood who played with Manfred Mann, and I knew him. He lived in the Cotswolds, but I didn't really know any others. And I used to talk to him about it occasionally, and he'd sort of encouraged me. But I was sort of sitting there writing about something about my past as a drummer, and I just suddenly put my thoughts down for a minute and I thought, hang on, what am I doing? I must be absolutely mad. Am I seriously going to meet loads of world-class drummers? Because with a book like that, if you wanted it published, it would have to be full of people who are well known. So I thought, am I seriously going to meet lots of world-class drummers? Get their time for nothing, meet them get their stories for nothing, get them to bother to meet me. It's not possible, which is why it's never been done. I better just get on with my work. Then I got an email, and to this day, I don't know who it was from. It was one of these rogue emails you sometimes get, and it came into my inbox. I opened it up and it said 3 words. It said, "Believe in yourself." And I thought, well, if that is one of the best Times anonymous emails I've ever had, the best I've ever had. So well timed, and I thought, I will then. So I carried on, and I did my networking. I spoke to people I knew in advertising and in the music and all that sort of thing. And fast forward 2 or 3 years, and I had met Nick Mason from Pink Floyd, Rick Buckler from The Jam, Topper from The Clash, Woody from Madness, John Moss from Culture Club, loads, over 40 world-class drummers. And I still don't quite know how that happened. I mean, I was helped a lot by lots of very good friends and people I knew, met in passing, who put me in touch with so-and-so and then so-and-so. And of course, once you get a few, your network just goes like that because everybody knows each other. Well, a lot of them do.
So,
that's right. So I kind of fell into that. Simply, I was very lucky, basically. So many people helped out. I was very lucky. Then, of course, the thing was trying to get it published. And that's a story in itself because I got made redundant from another job I'd got by this time at Christmas time, 2009. And,
lovely.
Yeah. And I was sitting at home thinking, shall I go to the Dog and Duck in Frith Street in London, Soho, which is where all the advertising and film people gather to chat at lunchtimes, especially when it's leading up to Christmas. And it's a good place to network to try and get some work. So I did. I thought, well, shall I or shan't I? Is it really worth the expense? But then again, it's a good time to network. So I did. I went up there, and I think it was a Friday lunchtime. And funny enough, that afternoon I had arranged for an interview with Steve White, Paul Weller's then drummer, who was the drummer with the Style Council. When he was 17, became drummer of Style Council. Anyway, I'd arranged to meet him outside Foot's the Drum Store at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is round the corner from Soho. So I thought, I will go early. I'll go into the Dog and Duck, see if I can get a job. So I did. And I bumped into two creative director friends of mine, and we were chatting away. And one of them said, Tim said, what's happening about that book you're writing, the drummer's book? I said, I've got loads of well-known drummers in it, etc. Got their stories and everything. But the thing is, I decided I needed a publisher, so I rang Penguin up the other day, and they laughed me off the phone. He said, well, they will, because, you've got this bloke ringing up saying, Nick Mason, the Clash, the Jam, the Mad, all that sort of thing, status quo. They're obviously going to think that you've been a victim of the recession and gone mad, so they...
Okay.
They did. They said, you can't just ring us up and expect us to believe everything you say. We don't know who you are, which is a fair comment. But he said, you need a writer's agent. That's how people get published. You need an agent.
Yes.
So I said, oh, right. And he said, I'll tell you what, actually, I know one. I know an agent. I said, he said, I'll give her a ring, and don't hold your breath, but give us your number and I'll ring you if she's interested. So I did. Then I went down and had I went down to Pizza Express and had a bite to eat and then a cup of coffee, and while waiting to meet Steve White around the corner, and I got a phone call from this mate of mine. He said, Spike, you've got to ring this woman. She thinks she can get you published. She thinks it's a great idea, book of famous drummers and their stories. So I said, okay, great. So I did ring her, and we had a great conversation, arranged to meet a couple of weeks' time again, somewhere in Soho or London. And she said, I can get you published. I think it's a great idea. And so I went home, having gone to London to network to get a job in advertising and meet a drummer for my book, not getting the job in advertising, but getting a publisher. So, or getting an agent who would get me a publisher. Yeah. So it just goes to show the moral of the story is if you're in doubt about whether or not to do something, leave the house. Go to another building. The thing is that's how I sort of fell into that. And yes, fast forward 9 months later, I was published by John Blake Publishing, and that's how I did that. So that again was all a set of very fortunate circumstances that were just based on actually believing in yourself, I suppose. But that email was so well timed, and I'd love to know where that came from.
Yeah. Was it something that was difficult once you got the agent to convince publishers to pick up, or did it get picked up pretty quickly?
I think she contacted quite a few who said, great idea, but it's not for us.
Okay.
Then she contacted John Blake, who used to be a music journalist years ago. And apparently he said to her, well, I know half the people in the book, so I'll publish it. So he wanted to do it because he felt a connection with the people that I had been talking to. So he had a sort of a kind of a personal connection with it. Again, that was good work to her, because she was very intuitive as to who to contact. She did her work. She was a very good agent.
It's interesting though, because one thing that I've picked up there that I didn't actually know was that you were speaking to a lot of these drummers prior to the book deal. Then
absolutely, I think about after I got the book deal. I mean, he said, I think it was. So yes, it was actually 2008 that I went up to London because I was made redundant. It was 2009 that round about September, October time that I got the deal with the publisher, who said, okay, I want 70,000 words or 65,000 words by the end of January. Okay, so I'd got about 45,000 words. I needed another 20, so I had to expand my network as quickly as possible. And I think it was after that I met Woody from Madness in London, and a load of others, Nigel from Saxon, lots of other people I met in a short period of time to get it up to that 65. In fact, it was 70,000 in the end.
Yeah.
But most of them, I mean, 3/4 of those drummers had already had their interviews done. The stories were already written and approved, with photographs approved as well, which is another thing is difficult to deal with. If you put photographs taken by a proper photographer in a book without their permission and they see it, they can then ask you for lots of money because you didn't ask them for permission.
Of course.
But if you ask them first, they'll usually say they don't want any money because they want it to go in the book.
Yeah.
So I discovered that you have to sort all that out first, as well as the permissions from the stories that the drummers have given you, because you're writing a story in the first person, so it's them talking, but you're writing it.
Yeah.
So, of course, you've got to make it entertaining, and all of it's true, but you have to write it in a certain way because you're the writer. But they then have to like the way you've written it. So
yes.
The tone of voice, because it sounds like it's coming from them and me. So it's a bit of a strange one, but you have to get all of that approved as well as the photos before any of it can be printed. I had done most of that by the time I got published, so I'm glad I had. Otherwise, it would have been a hell of a 3 months or 4 months to cram full of stuff to worry about. But yes, it was about as you can't expect to get a publisher, even if with an agent, much less than 6 months or a year, really, because it just takes time, unless you're very lucky. But then again, in a sense, you're lucky if it does take a bit of time, because it gives you time to prepare, etc.
And how long was it after you reached your deadline and you submitted the manuscript?
Yeah.
What was the time then to get it actually? Was it from the time that you submit those words to the publisher to the point where it was actually you could go into a bookshop and find it on the shelves of a bookshop? How long did that take?
Yeah, it was. I think it was about. I think I gave it to them. I think they gave me an extension to the end of February, so March, April, May, June, July. About 5 months, I think. 4 or 5 months until it was in. You could go into any Waterstones in the country, and most of the bigger ones had it in. Had Mad, Bad and Dangerous in there. The title of the book changed from Tales from the High Chair to Mad, Bad and Dangerous at the suggestion of my agent, because she said Tales from the High Chair doesn't tell you necessarily what that is. It doesn't scream out. You've got to look at it first, or notice a graphic of a drum kit or something, or drum stool. So she came up with Mad, Bad and Dangerous, which I liked, actually, the Book of Drummers' Tales. But it's also interesting to remember that apparently if your book is non-fiction, the publisher retains the right to title it and also to decide what goes on the front visually.
Okay.
If it's non-fiction. They came up with this, well, you'll see it on screen, obviously, the Mad, Bad and Dangerous naked drummer, or apparently naked drummer. They came up with that visual. It was from a stock library, and sent it to me, thinking that I'd have a problem with it because I hadn't thought of it. Because people can be, it wasn't something that I had thought of or wanted. But I looked at it and thought, do you know what, that's great. So I sent an email back saying, that's fantastic, thanks. And they were sort of rather surprised. Said, oh, good. Oh, okay. So, as in, we haven't got to have any arguments with you then about that.
Yeah.
So it was just worked very well. I mean, it was an easy process for me, from my point of view, anyway. And then they send you the edited manuscript, which they hadn't changed much at all. They made a decision that throughout the book originally, in the original manuscript, there were italics whenever I butted in. So I would have a comment throughout the stories. I might say the odd thing coming from me in italics, so that you knew suddenly the author who is listening to the story is now having a comment on it. And they put them at the end of each story, mostly. They said it because it makes a better read. It's a smoother read. If you have lots of italics
Yes.
turning up and two voices, it's uncomfortable for people. They keep having to jump from one train of thought to another. And while that could be amusing audibly or even in an interview, in a book, it's best to avoid changing those little blocks too much.
Okay.
And there was a couple where I said, no, leave them there because that does need to be there. And they did. So they were very good if they changed the odd sentence, which they didn't do much, to be honest. They didn't really touch much of it. I wanted it changed back and they did. So that was, again, it was a good process. So again, it's I think they would only really do that with non-fiction, because if something is fiction, it's what you wanted to say, and why would they want to mess around with it? You know, that doesn't kind of if it's a story, it's a story.
Yeah.
They can't decide what happens and what doesn't, or when and where, or whatever. So as long as
So another sort of question for you then that's sort of a point of interest, certainly for me, is two things really. First and foremost, right back at the beginning, where you're this guy, you've got an idea, you want to make it a reality. You're set with this daunting task of trying to get hold of these people that most people are going to consider quite hard to get hold of, quite hard, people to reach.
Yeah.
How is it that you went about getting hold of these people and getting interviews with them? And how did they react initially? Were they very positive, or did they need a little bit convincing? In the same way that obviously you said Penguin were, who are you? Were these guys the same, or did they jump at the chance? And then sort of the third and final part is to say, did they did the attitudes of these people change once they knew you had a deal, or was it exactly the same as it was before, and it was just a nice smooth process all the way through?
Well, basically, the thing is, people like that, of that stature, usually have people paid to get rid of people like me. So that's why I was so reluctant to even try and do it until I saw that email. But they were all incredibly nice about it, and there was nobody said, "Oh, I'm not sure about that." They all said, "Yeah, I'll do that." Obviously, I mentioned the people I got. I'm trying to think. The people I got to start with, I got top of Headon quite early on. Nick Mason from Pink Floyd, and various others quite early on. And what I would do is then, if I got the contact details for other drummers, I would email them or ring them up, and I would say who's already involved, that would then give them some sort of reassurance that this was a serious project, and there wasn't this crazy bloke at the end of the phone that they needed to get rid of. They realised that if that's the case, then I'd like to get on board too, because a lot of people must have thought, well, I've got a better story than that, or I've got something to say, So because I would send them bits of stuff so that they would, with the permission of the previous drummers. So it was like a kind of a. Once it got going, they all seemed to want to get on board, but that nobody said no, and they were all real gentlemen, really nice about it, really nice, and ladies, because Denise Dufour is in that amongst them, and all sorts of people, and then after that came the YouTube channel, which
yes,
because once the book had been out for a while. My nephew, who was then only about 19, he was starting up a sort of film company, and he had a couple of cameras with some good lights, a good sound thing. And he said, "Look, why don't we go back to some of those drummers and film them telling their story on camera?" So I said, "Okay, let's do that then." So I contacted Nick Mason's PA, and Vix, that's her name, Vicky, and she said, "Well, I'll ask Nick, see what he thinks about that." And she phoned back and said, "Yeah, he'd love to do it. Come to the office." and set up your cameras, and he'll do your, you can interview him. So we went to Nick Mason's office, which was then somewhere down the back of the Caledonian Road, I think. Anyway, it was a cab ride from Euston, King's Cross rather.
Mm-hmm.
So we went there, and we were shown into this vast area where there were drum kits set up and a sports car, very expensive open-top sports car, because he's a racing driver. That's his passion. And lots of memorabilia, Pink Floyd memorabilia everywhere. And he gave me a little... we decided to have a little walkabout first, which we did with all the videos after that. You do the walkabout for the front of the video, because it's a nice little intro. What we did was that we do the video first. Then once I got to know the drummer, we'd do the walkabout, so we could be a little bit more pally, But you put it put it at the front, so it's the right way around. So anyway, we did the interview. He was very eloquent, very funny, and he told me his story again. And then we did a walkabout, and he showed me the kit that he used on the Dark Side of the Moon tour, and this, that, and the other. And he couldn't have been nicer. I mean, I had a broken drum leg on my bass drum. I still got it, in fact. And it's just, they call them spurs. They keep the thing in place. Mm-hmm. One was broken, and I mentioned he's got a DW kit as well, a bit like mine. And I said, I just mentioned that it was broken, and that a friend of mine had tried to sort of bodge up something else, which he did successfully, but then that broke. And I said, I tried to get hold of DW on the phone, and they said, well, you've got to take a photograph of it and send it to us, because there's different types, and we don't, unless you bring it in, but they're miles away, So he said, don't worry, I'll get my man to sort it out for you. So
lovely. That's lovely of it. It's very nice.
That's really nice, So he was great, and then we went to see Topper Headon. I have a good friend, Alan Miles, who was doing some videoing for the fire brigade, because he was a fireman, and he was doing some videoing to do with their problems at the time. I think there was that they had some problems, the fire brigade, and he did some videoing because he started doing a bit of videoing. So he said to me and George, my nephew, why don't you come down to Dover to meet Topper Headon, because I've met him from The Clash, and we could film him in the kitchen, or whatever. So yes, we went down to see him. That's right. I got talking to Topper to get the story. That was earlier on. Then we got back to Topper when my nephew got involved and said, can we come and film you? So we did. We took a trip down to Dover and filmed him in his kitchen. We did another one a few years later in Blur's studio, Damon Albarn's studio in London. We did a second set of videos with Topper a couple of years after that. But so we started going around anyway to various places. Then someone called Jerome Marcus came on board, who was an industry consultant and drummer. But he was also the artist and repertoire sales guy for Sabian cymbals. So he was the person responsible for providing the artists with their free cymbals. So he knew a load of people, virtually everybody. So he got us to Kenny Jones's place in Hurtwood. That's the Faces drummer and the Who drummer after Keith Moon died. And then he got us to meet Mel Gaynor from Simple Minds, all sorts of people, loads of people. Gilson Lavis, Derek McKenzie, Jamiroquai, just loads of them. So the video channel just kind of exponentially built and built and built. And over a couple of years, of course, the equipment got better and better, but George's film company became a lot more professional, and we actually had people working. He had people working for him, so you'd have people standing around with headphones and clipboards and microphones and proper lights going up everywhere and stuff. So it became quite a good outfit, and we ended up doing lots of videos in the Horns in Watford on the stage there. We interviewed John Moss from Culture Club there, and we did. I was trying to think. hang on a minute, we did loads in there, loads, and they would actually let us do it, and they didn't close the pub in the afternoon, in the afternoons, but they let us ask people to be quiet while we were doing takes and that sort of thing, or retaking things. Bob Henriett we did there on the stage there, he played with Argent and the Kinks. Nigel Glockler from Saxon, we did Rick Buckler from the Jam there at the bar, you've probably seen that one, haven't you? And it was all great fun. Then of course it started to filter out a bit because everybody got busy doing other things, and this wasn't a job, of course, so no one was getting paid. So, but by that time it had done its work really on YouTube, and it's now, I checked this morning, now it's got over 490,000 hits. People looking at it. I think it's got something like 1,500 subscribers. So, and we keep intending to add to it more videos, but he's getting around to it because George is very busy as a proper film company now, and he works for he does films and corporate stuff as well. So he's really busy, sort of catching up with all of that and stuff, so editing and filming and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, that's where that ended up. Mad, Bad and Dangerous. It ended up on quite a popular YouTube channel.
But it sounds like you've got a lot of other potentially. You've got a lot of other stories there to tell. There's a lot of names that you've interviewed on the video that didn't appear in.
That's right, and that book is nearly finished. So
right,
a lot of the newer stories are in a second book, Mad, Bad and Dangerous 2, but which will be TOO by the end, by the way.
Yeah.
But again, I need to finish that, but that takes me back round to this book, Take Cover, which I wanted to finish before I didn't do it, because the experiences I had in the schools for 2 terms, I really wanted to get them down on paper, and other things that led to. So having finished Mad, Bad and Dangerous 2, nearly finished it, because I haven't finished it yet, and I still need to get the permissions and the photos and all that stuff. That's taken a back seat because I wanted to do this, get this Take Cover one finished, which is now done.
Well, let's fast forward a little bit then.
Yeah.
Because you've mentioned the new one, Take Cover, but I think before we really sort of dig into the detail of that, it would be worth going over the story of how you because essentially this is born out of the fact that you fell into cover support teaching.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So how I mean just obviously we'll have when I put this up on YouTube, we'll have a photo of you and your obviously your name's Spike. You're famous for your haircut. You definitely look like the kind of man to be sitting behind a drum stool. And then you end up going into these institutions. This is one of the things that was so interesting for me reading the book, reading Take Cover, is that you go into these institutions where, certainly my experience, I mean, I started growing my hair out, getting into rock and roll, getting into heavy metal, getting into playing guitar. And I'm in secondary school and I start growing my hair out. My friends are growing their hair out. We're all going to be rock stars. And of course the teachers were for the most part dead against it.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? Neat and tidy yourself up. But you fell into this where you were actually one of the people where, quote unquote, one of the authority figures in these places. How did that happen?
Well, basically, I took a job as an evening cleaner in Watford, just to get some money because I'd been made redundant. I couldn't get much freelance work because it was drying up because of the economic climate back in 2016. And so I was doing all sorts of different jobs. I'd been a window cleaner. I'd been a bit of a gardener, a bit of labouring, all sorts of things, as well as freelance writing, copywriting, which I did get some, but it wasn't, I was getting it, but it wasn't regular enough for me to feel comfortable. So I thought I need something which I do early evening, every evening, that I can rely on, and also keeps me active as well. So I became an evening cleaner as well as doing other things, and I was in a local pub in Oxley Village called the Villiers Arms, one Sunday, because I used to go there occasionally on a Sunday to see my friends, Robert Gill in particular, and I was in there, and they were talking to me about how the search for work was going. I think I'd done a gig the night before or something. They said, "Oh, good drumming last night." And someone said, "No, it was rubbish, terrible, embarrassing." Just a bit, just
of course,
just a bit of fun, bit of banter, they said, "How's the job hunting going anyway?" I said, "Are you still cleaning?" I said, "Yeah, I'm still cleaning, still finding bits of egg and stuff on the toilets. I can't understand how people want to eat on the toilet, but there we are." So there's
a story there to tell, and I don't know how much we should tell because obviously it's part of the book. But
yes,
I think that needs to be explained to an extent. What's that all about?
Well, basically, through the book Take Cover, which is this for the most part about my experience as a cover support teacher in local schools, that there's a backdrop of me being in the toilets in the evenings because I carried on the job as cleaner when I took the work as a cover support teacher. I would go cleaning in the evening, for some reason in these toilets, I'd often find bits of food on the floor, by the pans, stuff in the toilets themselves. In particular, eggshell and stuff like that, and bits of egg white and that. It's really quite horrible. But I was talking about that in the pub, and there was some amusement going on there. And this features at the beginning of the book. But people saying things like, well, if I was going to have to eat something in the toilets, I'd probably, if it was going to be an egg, I'd make it a Scotch egg because it's a lot sort of cleaner process, really. And we're saying, well, the last thing you'd want to eat in the toilet if you were forced to do it is eggs anyway. It's like a kind of absurd celebration of both ends of the process. Anyway, we were laughing about this, and they said, I said, I came across this website called Copify where you get these little jobs from some place and you write bits of copy for ridiculously small amounts of money. And they said, no, you don't want to be doing that. You want a proper job. And then someone said, why don't you ask Dick over there? He's just come in. He's been doing cover support teaching in a local school, and he's packing it in because he's had enough. Why don't you ask him how to go about it, because it's something you could be doing, I said, okay, I will. So I did. I asked him, and his advice was, well, it's really tough. It can be quite tough, very, very stressful, and in some ways you might have times when you're not stressed, but you will have times when you're extremely stressed because you're not actually a teacher. So you could be in any lesson at all. It could be maths, geography, history, English, anything. So, okay, my subject's English, and if I found myself in an English lesson, then I could maybe help out. I wasn't trained to teach GCSE, but I could maybe answer your question or whatever, or give some encouragement. But if it's any other lesson, then of course I can't do anything. I can't pretend to teach them maths or geography or whatever, or about land irrigation and all that sort of thing. So all you do is give out the books, the work that's been left for them, and see if you can make them do it. But because they know it's a cover lesson, it's what they essentially see as a free period, really, because you're not their teacher. So that's the way it works psychologically. It's tough because they know that you're not their teacher, and if they mess around, then there's not much is going to happen about it. So he said it's tough, but yes. So anyway, I rang up. I got hold of an agency, and they signed me up, and I had a meeting with them, and I would be phoned up at, say, 6 o'clock in the morning at random, because it was rarely planned. Sometimes they'd ring up the night before, say, can you go into so-and-so place tomorrow and so-and-so on Wednesday or whatever. Sometimes you just get a phone call in the morning that would just, say, well, can you go into so-and-so day, or can you take a trip over to Hemel today and do this one. So you literally have to leap out of bed, and of course, so you're at this sort of this juxtaposition where you part of you wants the phone to ring because you need to earn some money to pay the bills and socialise, if you like to do that, and part of you doesn't want it to ring because you really don't want to do it. So it's that sort of, when it rings, you're completely confused as to, but of course, you have to take the work, and so that's how I got into it. It was not by accident, but it was a suggestion in a pub saying, why don't you do that? You qualified, because in order to do it, I needed some kind of teaching qualification. And a year before, I had done a TEFL course in London, a sandwich course, 1 month, highly intense TEFL course. Nothing to do with plastic kitchenware, I happen to add. It's teaching English to foreign learners is what that stands for, as many people will know. And so, because I had passed that and completed that course successfully, it meant that I had some teaching experience for a month with foreign learners. And I had done a little bit of that since, funnily enough, privately, but not very much. So that meant that I could stand up in front of other people and not fall to bits, if you see what I mean. So, and also I knew a little bit about a subject, or a lot about a subject, but it enabled me to do it. So that's how I went into it. But it is, as the front of the book says, take cover, the true story of one man's unlikely venture into the hazardous world of cover support teaching, because I don't look like the sort of person that would necessarily do that. And I mean, this spiky haircut I've had for donkey's years, but I didn't get it done because I wanted to look like Rod Stewart. I did it because I just thought it suited me best, because I didn't want it to be any other way, particularly many years ago.
Yes.
And but the thing is that when I had my first lesson in the school that I took, the first cover lesson I took, one of the first things they said to me as they sort of charged him was, "You look like Rod Stewart." And eventually, as the terms went by, the 2 terms, I became known as Rod at this one school. People would shout out, "Oh, Rod!" and do a high five. And I was thinking, is this appropriate? It's
Yes.
But I didn't, I looked a bit unusual. It's not like many cover support teachers would look like, I don't think. So it was unlikely. It's not something I ever had intended to do. And that's why my reaction or experiences are a little bit from a different angle, if you like, because I didn't go in from any vocational reason or any with any experience in any other schools or anything. So it's an unlikely situation for me to find myself in, and so for me, what I discovered and some of the very funny things that happened, some moving things and some quite shocking, I wanted to write them down. And being a writer already anyway, I thought, well, this would make an interesting book, but of course, I couldn't put it down as from the point of view of a teacher, because I'm not actually a teacher. So I had to put it down from a complete layman's point of view. This is what happened, and this was my reaction to it. But after 2 terms, I did get to know some of the kids. Obviously, you see some of them once or twice or whatever, a week, depending on how many days you go. And sometimes you don't get to go anywhere because they don't need a cover teacher, or they don't need that many. So other times you're going in every day, so you never know. But you get some familiar faces, and you start to sort of care about it. You care about these people. You want them to have a future. You want them to be successful in whatever dreams they have. So it's probably one of the best things I've ever done. I think it was, they taught me a lot about myself, because it reminded me a lot about things I thought I'd forgotten about when I was at school. Shyness, that sort of thing, not wanting to eat in front of people for some reason. Because at the schools, when I was in the schools as cover support, I would take my sandwiches that my wife had made for me, and eat them outside the school, walking along by the field or whatever, or because I didn't want to eat them in the staff room, because I found that embarrassing. Yeah. I don't know why, but I would then go back to the staff and have a cup of coffee, and then maybe have a chat with some other cover teachers. But I would go and eat in private. And other schools, there wasn't a field outside, so I'd have to go and hide. I'd always be hiding while I was eating my sandwiches or my rolls or whatever. And that's how I felt at school. When I first, in my what was then called the first year, which would be year 7 now, when I was 11, when I went to my big school, I would take my break time sandwiches, and I would take them to the music block. This is Watford Grammar School, boys' grammar school. They had a music block, and a smaller one than they've got now. But I would take them upstairs, the upstairs room of the music block, where there was a bunch of fifth formers, and they had this music room as their kind of form room, and they'd go there at break time, and they'd play piano and mess about, and they all had long hair, which I wanted. And I would climb up the chairs. They had chairs stacked at the back of this music room, and I'd climb up to the top of the chairs, so I was far away as possible, eat my sandwiches, and just stare at them, just watch what they were doing. Admiring them, basically, And they would look up at me, wondering what on earth is this little kid doing there? Every break time he comes and eats his sandwiches and stares at us from the top, from the ceiling. Mm-hmm. And occasionally they'd nod, say, all right, And I think I was off with mumps or something for a week or something like that, and I came back and they actually said, oh, nice to see you back, So I was shy about that, shy about eating in front of people, shy anyway, a bit. Then I got to second year came around. I made some friends in the first year, and I stopped doing that after a while. I'd go into the quads and whatever and walk about. And I started to lose the shyness. And in the second year, I started growing my hair a bit long because my mum and dad started letting me do that. And people started talking to me about Top of the Pops. And I said, oh yeah, I like Mungo Jerry, I like Jethro Tull or whatever, and they were saying Slade, they're saying, oh, do you like T-Rex? And then all of a sudden, I clicked with loads of people, and then we started messing about and that, and I started becoming, friends with people. And then I started being sort of going a bit eccentric as well, deliberately, because I liked making people laugh, like lots of people do, mm-hmm. So anyway, after that, as my school life went on, it was great. I loved it, and I became known as Spike because I didn't have spiky hair when it was just becoming long. It was quite thick, and for some reason, I used to fashion it into a kind of ball, like an onion, facing upwards. So it looked like I had an onion on my head, facing the ceiling. Someone just pointed at it and went, "Spike! Look, there's a spike," and that's how the name stayed. Yes. I encouraged it because I wanted a. In all boys' school, it's good to have a nickname, So I encouraged it, and by the end of my school days, but fast forward to the sixth form, I'd be walking down the corridors and people were shouting "Spike" like that. The younger years would shout out "Spike" because it's a name you remember. Mm-hmm. So it's an irony that many, many decades later, I'm walking down school corridors, but they're not shouting "Spike"; they're shouting "Rod." Yeah, because I got my haircut as sort of. Evolved into something like the sort of feathered look that people like, Rod Stewart Roddy would have, but not because I was intending to look like that at all, but because that's just the way it ended up. But it's a nice irony that that I'm being shouted Rod or Sir Rod even, Sir Rod.
Well, it's interesting because of course your Spike as a name has. You use that professionally, don't you? I mean, you use it. Yeah. It's your author name.
Yeah.
It's your. I mean, you and I met in a professional setting. You were doing copywriting. Yeah. For the marketing department of the company that I work at.
Yeah.
And you went by the name Spike there on all your emails and everything.
Yes,
everything right. Like that. So it's obviously stuck very well. Okay, so if we sort of fast forward again a little bit more, because the book is to be fair, I mean there's a few parts of that which are, you could say, somewhat controversial.
Yeah.
In the sense of you're making some claims. I don't think claims is the right word, or at least, the very least, some critiques about the way that teaching operates. At what point did you decide? Throughout the experience, was it during the experience? Was it after the experience that you decided I'm going to write this book? And at the same time, was that for a particular reason? Was there something that actually made you say this is a book that needs to be written?
it was a gradual process, really. Some of the things that happened are not things that you would be necessarily surprised about, but some of it also happened gradually. So, for instance, one thing I noticed was that to communicate properly with these students, you have to work out how to relate to them psychologically, in particular because you can't discipline them by using any form of force or anything like that. So the fact that you can't actually touch them means that you have to, you can't say someone's insisting on standing up and shouting. You can't put your hand on their shoulder and motion for them to go down. You can't do that. So you have to persuade them in another way that it's a good idea for them to sit down. So that's a very, very raw premise, if you like. But if they're going to be all shouting and they're going to be doing exactly what they want, you have to persuade them that they can't do that. And if they're doing it en masse, it's very difficult. You're sort of running around, walking around, trying to sort out pockets of things that are going on. So my take on it was that the lack of discipline is not the fault of the schools, because they don't make those decisions. It's the point is, when I was at school, I remember that there were certain things, limits to which you were prepared to go if you wanted to mess about, because you weren't sure what would happen if you pushed it too far. You knew it wouldn't be nice, but you didn't know what it would be. So normally you knew that there is a man who resides down the corridor behind a door which is rarely opened, and he's called the headmaster. And if you really pushed it too far and didn't have any respect for the teachers or the authorities, you would have to go and see him. You would have to go and seek his company. And you knew that would have possibly very grave consequences. But the thing is, they didn't really talk about that much. And you didn't see this man very often. If you did see him walking down the corridor, you had better do your tie-up and walk by quietly. That's how it was in those days, of course. And that's very old-fashioned these days. But you don't have that ability to say. You can't really say, we're going to send you down to see so-and-so. You can say that, and they probably don't want to go there, but they're not scared. They're not really worried particularly by that. So you don't have this ultimate mystery about what will happen to you if you misbehave too much. For instance, this manifested itself in a consequences chart on the wall. You've got two charts, rewards and consequences. And they're lists, R1, R2, R3, C1, C2, C3, whatever. I think a C3 was a detention, C1 was a warning, C2 was a second warning on the board or whatever. I can't remember quite the details now, but it was displayed on the wall. So it's like a kind of currency. So basically, the kids can look on the walls, and they know the consequences chart really well, like the back of their hand, Mm-hmm. If there was an exam in that, they'd pass every time. So they say, "Sir, that was a C3." If someone's just done something that would initiate a C3. No, that's a C4, sir. That's definitely a C4. So they would tell you what the consequences of what someone else was doing are. So, so as a teacher, that's fine, because you have a relationship with them and you know how to deal with each individual because you've built it up over time. But as a cover support teacher, you don't, because you don't know these people particularly, and you're not trained or briefed in that way of doing things. So, of course, you can send people out, but sometimes people want to go out. The number of requests to go to the toilet is unbelievable. There's some great actors among them. They really do look like they're in physical pain when they say, "I really need the toilet, sir." Most of the time they don't. They just want to get out of the room. But that's fun. That can be funny, even. I used to say to them, look, if all the people in here who wanted to go to the toilet, if I let all the people in here who want to go to the toilet go to the toilet, there'll be more people in the toilets than there would be in the classroom. So you can't all be telling the truth. So I have to assume that none of you are, because it's not fair to single anyone out as opposed to anybody else. So none of you can go to the toilet. So, but that's that's just one small thing. But basically, I just thought this is quite interesting. All this. I mean, the consequences chart on the wall, as I said, it's a bit like a kind of currency they have to misbehave. So they can look at what will happen to them if they do a certain number of things wrong. Now, for instance, if say a C3 is stay behind after school for an hour, like what used to be called a detention,
yes,
they can decide whether or not they can afford that. Now, am I doing football tonight? Have I got footy tonight? No. We're having a bit of fun here, so I don't mind staying by the half, if I get C3, and then if you don't turn up, they sort of stack up like a kind of debt. So,
okay, yeah.
But the consequences chart is gone from the walls now, because I went back in after having been made redundant from my last job. I went back in for a few weeks to the schools before lockdown, and I did notice that those charts are now online. It's all online now on the intranet, school intranet. So you go there to visit your particular what you must or must not do as a consequence of your behaviour. But when they were on the wall, I came up with this conclusion about it, because what used to be said to students before, back in the old days when discipline was more prevalent, if you like, we used to say, we expect you to behave. If you do not, there will be consequences. Mm-hmm. Now, with consequence charts, what we're saying is, we expect you to misbehave. Here are the consequences. Yeah. Which is an entirely different message. And that's what I thought was, I thought, well, some people have probably, there will have been people, I don't know, civil servants, people in the education department, I don't know anything about it. They will have been at pains to come up with a way of disciplining school children, because teachers' hands are tied so much by with restrictions with regard to discipline now, human rights, all this sort of thing. So they've had to come up with some way of doing it. So I didn't want to sound like I was sort of some jumped up stranger going on about a method that's been put in place and discussed for many years, thinking I know everything, because I don't. But this is my reaction. This is how having gone in there completely blind, thinking, well, this clearly doesn't work, because they're just using it as a it's like a game. If you're going to play a game, if you want to win the game, what do you not do is put all your cards down on the table face up for everybody to see. You've got to keep some things back so that people can expect the unexpected. Otherwise, if they know exactly what's going to happen to them for any given offence, then they're going to win the game every time. It's game on for the kids, it's game over for the teachers. So, for the cover teachers anyway. Some of the teachers are great. I mean, I didn't see a lot of teaching because that's why I was there, because the teachers weren't there. So, I didn't witness much teaching, but anything I did witness on the odd occasion was really good. It was excellent. It's just that they're so tired, or they're so involved with all the other things they have to do, which doesn't involve any teaching, which is all to do with, I don't know, some of my family are teachers, and they have to spend whole evenings just filling out this, filling out that, all that sort of stuff. That they have to do so much more than just teach. That, of course, the consequence of that is that they can't always be in the lessons. So that's why cover teachers go in, because maybe they're sick, maybe they just have to catch up on this, that, and the other, and so that's why people like me are in there so often. So it's not a rant about anything to do with teaching or the teaching profession at all. In fact, actually, I'm quite complimentary about that. It's just the lack of available tools to discipline teenagers. I was quite not shocked, but I was surprised by what it would actually be like to try and do that if you're not properly trained. So, I mean, for instance, there are some people who are naturally brilliant at convincing people to do what they want them to do. For instance, I was in one lesson covering, I think it was a history or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, the door to the classroom was open. It'd been left open, and someone had asked it to be kept open. I don't know why, but they had. And I was trying to control this class, who knew that it was a covered period. Of course, they knew it was a covered period, so to them it was rather like a free period. I was trying to get them to do this, that, and the other, and they were in part, but then pockets of people talking, pockets of people getting out their mobile phones and hiding them again and stuff, and some even playing cards. And so you have to go over and stop all that. So you say, no, sorry, put them away, no, mobile phones away, come on. And walking up and down, all this sort of thing. But the volume in the room gets louder and louder, and of course you can gesture for it to go down, and you can raise your voice a bit, but they know that they can carry on getting louder again. They know they can. So anyway, it was a bit of mayhem in there, and this teacher came in unexpectedly, and he's not a large man, just just ordinary, regular guy, not particularly sternly dressed, just an ordinary teacher guy. Came as soon as he appeared, dead silence, complete silence. He came in, and he sat down on a chair and just sort of looked around, you could heard a pin drop. They all had their books open. They were all sort of, And I thought, what is it that he? Why are they so terrified of him? He didn't look frightening, but he sat there for about 5 minutes, and there wasn't a peep out of them at all. Now these people, I think it was 13, 14 years old, and they can make a lot of noise, and there was not a sound at all. And he got up and said, "All right, sir." I said, "Yes, thank you, sir." And he just walked out and left. And then gradually it started to build again once it was clear that he'd left that part of the building.
Of course, yeah.
And but I thought, what is it that he's got about him that he managed that controls them to that degree? And it must be to do with having the right. Not personality is the wrong word, but the right countenance and the right training, because I saw it happen again with the same guy on a couple of occasions. He just would completely quieten everyone down, but he didn't do anything. Didn't have to say anything at all. So I thought, has he actually got a gun? I mean, is it, do they know he's got a gun? I mean, it's just. It was bizarre, but it was great. I mean, it was helpful to me. I'm very grateful to him. I never found out his name or didn't get to know him or anything. But so there are people that just have that talent, if you like, for controlling people en masse. But not everybody has that, and certainly cover teachers, even if they did have it, wouldn't really be able to implement that or deploy it because. They're not there regularly enough to be relied upon for it to be consistent. So you could be going from one school to another, one room to another, and you wouldn't be able to adopt that kind of countenance successfully because the students aren't used to the thought that you might be a regular fixture. So that's the point. They might know you, but they might never see you again either.
Yeah.
It'd
just be interesting to sort of look at some of the other aspects of the book as well, because it by no means is that that is a big part of the book. Obviously, that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's one. There's one chapter on that, and that's it really. The rest is all about experiences. There's some very funny stuff. Some of them are great. I mean, they were really a lot of them were very interesting. And as I say in the book, they taught me a lot more than I could ever have taught them. So it's as I say, it's one of the best things I've done, and I wouldn't regret a minute of it. But it was very, very stressful as well. Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
But you I was going to say you jump quite well artfully, I would say, between your experience that you're having, almost the way that you make it feel is that you're having in the moment. You really draw the reader into that moment, but you contrast that as well with this gig you've got going on in the evenings where you're doing the cleaning, which is, I mean, some of the funniest parts of the book are some of the bizarre goings on that you've got there, and then some of the bizarre goings on that you've had in pretty much every job that you've done. And also one of the things that I found really entertaining was I don't know, it's the way that you sort of just fell into doing the copywriting for the advertising, particularly on some of those gigs. It was really just chance meetings, wasn't it?
Yeah.
With the with people on trains and all sorts.
Oh yeah, I mean, I spent the first 10 years of my working life in the civil service in Watford Department of Employment headquarters, Orphanage Road, in a vast, haunted building that used to be the London Orphanage, funnily enough, many years ago. Then it became a prisoner of war hospital during the war, and then was commandeered by the Department of Employment after that to become government offices. And I was in various different departments there for 10 years because you were on flexi time and you could sort of leave early if you needed to, or if you were rehearsing with the band or had a gig or something like that. So I spent 10 years not doing very much in the civil service in order to try and become a pop star, which I didn't. But that was the sort of the backdrop to what I was doing. And and then one day a friend of mine who'd also been in the civil service with me years before, after 10 years, he'd left, gone to college, gone to university, got a degree and got into advertising. He remembered me from school, and I'd been in bands with him as well, so I mean, we were good friends. Anyway, I got a call after 10 and a half years in the civil service from this group head stroke creative director at Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising saying, would I like to go and work for him? So I had no interview, no CV required. Just, would you like to come and work? Would you like to come and work as a copywriter in the creative department at Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising, working on press ads for various retail companies, national press, maybe get on to some radio, TV, that sort of thing. Now that's the sort of thing that's straight out the blue. That had I gone to university, I got a place in Sheffield University to do English literature. I decided to put it off for a year so I could play the drums, and then it became 10 years that I just didn't go eventually.
Yes.
But Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising back in 1988 was the most famous advertising agency in the world. Now, if I had gone to college to do a degree in English literature, if I got a degree in English literature, a good one, and gone into advertising, I wouldn't have got near the door of Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising, probably not. I'd have worked in a smaller agency somewhere, maybe outside London, in London, whatever. But there was people didn't get near the door of Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising, all the big names like that. So I spent 10 years messing about in the civil service, and then someone rings me up and says, would you like to come and work at Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising, which is where I would have wanted to be had I gone to college, and probably not even had the opportunity. So
yes.
So I walked into advertising, into Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising, and of course the salary was bigger than the civil service, which was very low. But I walked into Saatchi & Saatchi Advertising, and I stayed there for 6.5 years as a copywriter. So now all of a sudden I'm a copywriter, rather than.
Had you done anything like that before?
No, I'd never done anything like that before at all.
Crazy. Okay, yeah, fantastic.
So I was lucky in that some other friends of mine were there as well, and they showed me the ropes, and
Yeah.
eventually I got the hang of it. It took me longer, obviously, than it would have taken any other people because I had no experience whatsoever. So anyway, I was there for 6.5 years, quite happy. Went from one department to another, and I was working on Dixons and Currys at the time in PC World press ads with my then art director Gary Curd. And one morning I was on platform 7 at Watford Junction Station, and getting on this intercity train which went straight to Euston from Watford. Didn't stop on the way, and it was fast and more comfortable. Technically, a few of us did that, but technically we weren't supposed to be on that train. We were supposed to be on the other one, which was platform 9, which stopped at several places and was slower. But the actual distance was the same, but my ticket was for, I think, a Silverlink rather than intercity. But lots of people did it. They jumped on just so they could get there quicker, more comfortably. No, you only got your wrist slapped or something like that. If nothing really happened to you for it. So anyway, I was sitting on the train reading my novel, and this voice. This deep voice said in front of me, "I see we're on the naughty train." So I looked up, and it was this big black guy who I recognised from the platform, and we'd nodded to each other occasionally. We didn't know him, but each other we just nodded politely, And I thought, well, he's having a chat. I'll put my novel away, and we'll, He's a really nice guy. It turned out that he's actually the big guy in a Miller Lite advert TV commercial. Because he was a bit part actor, but his main thing was he was in marketing. Anyway, he got talking to me. He said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm in advertising as well." Funny enough, And I respect him. I said, "Yeah, what do you work on?" I said, "Well, retail accounts like Dixons and Currys and stuff like that." He said, "Does it suit you?" I said, "Yes, it suits me down to the ground because I get to leave work reasonable time every day, so that I'm still a drummer. I like to." Get to rehearsals and gigs and stuff like that. He said, "Oh, right, so at that point, I was talking to him, at that point, this voice piped up from across the gangway. There's 3 guys sitting there, total strangers. And he said, 'Do you mind if we interrupt?' I said, 'Not at all.' He said, 'Do you want to come and work at Thompson's?' I said, 'What, J. Walter Thompson?' Which was then a really well-known, it still is a really well-known advertising agency. And they said, 'Yeah, we just won the 54 million Boots account, but we haven't got anyone to work on it.' I said, 'Oh, really?' They said, 'Yeah, we didn't expect to win a retail account like that, and all our creative department are refusing to touch it. Because they all work on all the Dulux and all that stuff, whatever, they don't want to work on Boots.' I said, well, they said, it's really uncanny because before you got on, we're creative group heads at JWT. This is a creative director at Grey Advertising. We'd asked him if he knew of anybody who'd be prepared to work on Boots, and he said, 'No, I don't. There's no one in our creative department that would want to do that.' Then you got on and just did an interview without even knowing it, talking to this complete stranger. So, of course, by this time we're all on the concourse at Euston, introducing each other and whatever and stuff, And he said, 'Come and see us because we've got this Boots account. We're desperate for people to work to get a team to work on it. So bring your art director in on Monday.' And so we did. Overnight, we doubled our salary, and we got. Basically, we went to see these guys at JWT, and they had their feet up on the desks and were both jamming with Stratocaster guitars with practice amps. And they got all these awards on the wall for commercials they've been doing, and or done.
Yeah.
And I suppose I have to talk money to make this to drive the point home. At Saatchi's, my art director and I were on about 23,000 each a year, and that was back in 1994, which was not bad. That was quite a good salary in 1994. So we decided that I would do the talking. So he said, "Sit down, guys. How do you fancy coming to work at Thompson's then?" Really good guys, these people. And I said, "Well, Dixons and Currys, Saatchi's it's very secure. We've been there some years, so we're a bit reluctant to leave. But having said that, this is a great opportunity. And he just said, cut the crap, how much do you want? We said, well, okay. I said, okay, well, we couldn't think of moving for any less than 35. Because they'd said to us at work, they don't know what you're on. They're desperate for people to work on it. It's £54 million account. So we said, we could think of moving for anything less than 35. He said, well, how's 40 sound then? So we sort of looked at each other and said, can we think about it? So we got back and having not thought about it, we rang them up and said, yes, well, yes, we're very keen to do that. Can we have... Because we went back to Saatchi's and told our friends there, and they said, well, you could ask for some other stuff. They clearly really want you. So we said, can we have a car each, please? Brand new, tax insured, everything, for nothing. And they said, yeah, you can have a car each. And I couldn't even drive. I don't drive. So we said, okay, we'll get back to you. We said, all right, we'll get back to you. So we then said to our mates, one of our mates said, actually, don't have a car because you get clobbered for tax. So we rang back and said, sorry, we don't want a car after all. He said, all right. I said, could we have some more money instead? He said, okay, we'll get back to you. So he rang me back. He said, Spike, you're making money hand over fist here. Okay, another £5,000 each. So now we're on 45 £45 each, having been on 23 3 days before, working on the Boots account. And so we had the cheek to ring up one more time, and we said, look, okay, we're happy with the 45 grand salary. What we'd like to do, though, is obviously we've got to give 1 month's notice to Saatchi and Saatchi. After that month, we'd like to go on holiday for a week, and we'd like that on full pay, on top of our agreed holiday agreement for JWT. So we want you to pay for us to go on holiday first before we start. And they said, okay. so we did exactly that, and when we got there, they said basically the credit department works in a certain way here, and we want you to know that we do expect the work to be of a high quality and on time, etc. But if that is the case, then we want you to have a really nice time. So if you haven't got anything to do, we don't want you to be sort of twiddling your thumb. To have a nice time, and whatever, but we were encouraged to go and enjoy ourselves, and sometimes it would be at their expense as well. But the real icing on the cake was they said to me, yeah, of course you're a drummer. We overheard that conversation you had on the train, that you're a drummer. And then, of course, they were guitarists. They said, we're thinking of, we might be putting an agency band together, but would you be interested? I said, yeah, sure. And they said, anyway, by the way, there's a drum kit in the basement. Go and play it whenever you like. I said, what? They said, well, the last creative director who's left fancied himself as a bit of a drummer, but he left his drum kit behind. Doesn't want it, so you can have it. So not only did I get the, for me then, the dream job in advertising, I got a drum kit in the basement set up for me whenever I wanted to go and play it.
Was it any good?
Yeah, it was a good quality drum kit. Can't remember what make it was now, but it was a good quality drum kit. I didn't go and play it a lot actually, because I did have to concentrate on. Obviously, we had to do some work.
Yes.
But it wasn't anything like as intense as working on Dixons and Currys. I mean, it was. Then we got to work on other briefs for the department, for the creative department. We got to work on other accounts, which meant going to lots of shoots. We shot a lot of stuff for Boots anyway, commercials and stuff. So we ended up going into TV and radio and all sorts. And so we were in and out of, places like Pinewood and whatever. And then post-production in Soho as well, the studios there, sound studios, video, what was Telecine in those days, and all the special effects studios, all that sort of thing. So we spent years doing that, and had a really, really good time. Because directors and film companies and producers take you to lunch all the time, and you don't pay for anything, Anyway, it was a lovely time. But I won't tell you the rest of what happened to...
Yeah.
I won't tell you the ending of that, because it's all in the book.
Yes.
But it was an extraordinary stroke of luck on both counts. Civil service, such and such advertising, then suddenly double your salary overnight because of a conversation that happened on a train, working for someone else in Mayfair, JWT.
Well, this is, as you said before, leave the house.
Just go, leave the house, and if someone talks to you, talk back.
Yes.
Don't ignore them.
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah. Never dismiss anyone. I mean, I know I've heard so many stories where people, you hear about people at the time that, someone comes along and they're like, why would I want to talk to you? And they dismiss them. And then other people I know, and, they're some of the most fortunate things that have happened to them have actually happened to them purely from being friendly and being nice.
Yeah.
And not dismissing anybody, and certainly not, trying to seek out the most influential person. Just seeking out people that you have a rapport with. So, I'm absolutely behind that one. So the question then becomes, I mean, what was the process like of you finish writing the book and you eventually publish the book under very different circumstances?
Yes.
So how did that differ, and how did you find that?
Basically, I approached my agent who got me published with Mad, Bad and Dangerous with this idea, and she said, well, she said, the title is great, take cover. It's a great title. She said, but John Blake wouldn't be interested in it because it's not his sort of thing. John Blake publishes mainly books with famous people in them. So John Blake wouldn't have been interested, to be fair, because that's not his area. So she said she'd think about it, but eventually she said it's a great title, but I don't think it's for us because it's not something that we would take on. So she said, I suggest that you investigate other avenues. So I thought of, I did get in touch with some people. There were some people I was put in touch with kindly by some friends of mine who had been in publishing, etc. So I contacted some agents and some publishers, but I didn't hear much back. And I could have spent some time trying to get it published the traditional way, but because of what happened with going back into the schools, because over time I wrote it. Some of the book I wrote in the evenings after leaving my job at Bricket Wood, which I got, and I would spend some evenings writing it, but I'd have to go somewhere to do it. I couldn't do it at home, so I would say go to the Southern Cross in Watford, a place it's a big sort of hotel with lots of nooks and crannies, and I'd sit there and write it, or I'd go to the library at the weekend or whatever. And I thought, well, I really want to get it out there because it is it's something that no one's done. I don't think anyone's written about being a cover support teacher before, but there's so much to say about what it's like. Lots of things happened that were very funny, which I thought I would like to share, and some moving bits as well, moving things which I wanted to share with people. So, but I also wanted to do it before someone else did it. So I thought, well, then lockdown happened, and we got chatting, and I thought. I investigated, actually slightly before that, I investigated self-publishing. I Googled it, and lots of articles turned up on screen, certain websites and whatever. And one of them was very interesting. It was by a lady who runs a self-publishing sort of outfit, not outfit, but it's a sort of a consortium or something like that. Anyway, she said that lots of people have self-published before. Mark Twain, James Joyce, William Blake did nothing else, so it's not something that if you want to say something to people, there's nothing wrong with insisting that you do. There's nothing wrong with doing it, and if you want to entertain people, I mean, people entertain people all the time, don't they? They get up on stages and they offer their axes to the crowd. They they get on. They don't have to have permission from somebody else to do it, except the person in charge of the building. It's you have to give yourself permission to, if you think you've got something worth saying and worth entertaining people with in whatever way. It's important to give yourself permission to do it, and if you can get published, that's great, because publishers make sure that your book is distributed in a way that you can't do, unless you're fortunate enough to be really rich. But if you're not, you can't get them distributed to every shop in the country and abroad or whatever. Plus, if you aren't published these days, you can't go into Waterstones and say, look, I'm local, this is the book that I've written, I think you might be interested in it because it's quite current, it's topical, etc., etc.
Yes.
What they'll say is, well, and if you say, look, would you like 2 books anyway? Just sell promotional ones, just put them on your shelves and sell them. They say, so we're not allowed to do that. They can't. They can't do that. It's against the law. So their policies are that they have to go through certain processes. Even if you offer them a free book, they won't sell it. You have to go through a process. You can do it, but you have to go through a certain process. Now, you can't do that with every Waterstones in the country. You'd be mad. It'd be drive you around the bend. So basically, traditional publishing is great because it gets you out there very quickly. When Mad, Bad and Dangerous was published, it was immediately on the database of websites of Tesco, obviously Waterstones, but Tesco's, Asda's, all sorts. And of course, it was translated into foreign languages, and it went up, and it's shipped out, distributed, all that sort of thing. But if I waited around, the book still wouldn't be here, I wouldn't have thought. So, I might never have got published. So I decided to self-publish because I wanted to say something, and I wanted I wanted to make them laugh, wanted to move them as well, even if it's just people I know or whatever, you don't know what's going to happen with the book. But so we got together, didn't we? And you came up with this software which made it easier to do it professionally. We kept control over it, what it looked like, how it would come out, all that sort of thing. And then, of course, Amazon do the rest. The other thing is with self-publishing is you do get a better deal, unless, of course, you're famous. But if you're not, then you'll get a better deal if you self-publish. As opposed to being published, you get a lesser percentage. The publisher will take more. But of course the publisher does more. But then a publisher will give you an advance, which you won't get if you self-publish. So, but that's payable.
Let's jump on that then, because that's an interesting one, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions with this about when you get a traditional deal, exactly what that traditional publisher is going to be doing for you versus what you're not getting. Because the big one that people say, and this is the one I hear all the time, they say you've got to go, if you can, you've got to go down the traditional route. Now this is not in any way a critique of the traditional route. I still think that there's very much a place for the traditional publishers today. But the misconception that I seem to find is a lot of people believe that if you go through a traditional publisher, they're going to be doing the marketing, they're going to be doing the promotion of the book. Did you find that was the case with Mad, Bad and Dangerous, or not?
Well, they did initially. They do a certain amount. Of course, they do get it into all the shops. If you're published, it's easier for you to do your own bit of marketing as well, because you can go to Waterstones in Oxford Street and see your book. You see your book in there, and you say, would you like me to sign a couple of them? They say, yes, please, and they put signed by the author on it, but not all of them, because otherwise it doesn't look special, so you do that.
Yes, of course,
But if you do that, then you can go to Waterstones, say, in another town somewhere. You can contact them, saying, I'm going to pop in, I'm published at John Beck Publishing. They look on their database, there it is. They take you seriously if you take a couple of books in, say they haven't stocked it for some reason, because the publisher reps do go to all the shops and recommend that they get it. They will do that initially, but they won't keep on doing that. So you have to follow up by doing it yourself. So what they don't do is put loads of posters up all over the country, because you're not famous. If you are, they will. And incidentally, if you are famous, you will get the deal you want. That's different. But if you're not, if you're just published, you will need to get your own flyers done. You will need to put them in your own posters up and get permission to put them up. All that sort of thing. And it can be hard work, but it's fun because you know that you're published and they've done the basics. So everything else you do is, you haven't got to do it. You're doing it because you want to do it. Whereas if you're self-published, you have to, the feeling is you need to justify being self-published by doing that. So if you want it to be successful, you've got to work very hard at the marketing, and that's not always easy, especially given the fact that so much of it is done online now, that you need to have the kind of mind that can jump from one thing to another very quickly. So a good thing to do, really, if I had, for instance, if I was currently employed with a salary, I would pay somebody much younger than myself to do all the social media stuff, which I find a bit confusing. So that's what I would do. But I can't do that at the moment because I'm not a salaried individual. So I'm doing my own bits of marketing, because traditionally one would, you'd write posters and put them up, and that's fine. I can write posters and I can do flyers and stuff. Of course, like that.
Yes. But it was bread and butter for a long time.
But it's the online stuff, and finding out the intricacies and the best way to use Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all these things. It is really easy if you're a young person, because it's really obvious. But if you're older, for some reason, it's really difficult. So, not for all, it is for me anyway. So I can do it to a degree, but what takes me a few days will take a kid half an hour, or half a day or whatever. So there is that side to it, but I would say that if you publish your own book, it's something that you need to feel a bit differently about. You need to sort of think, well, I've done it, even if only 5 people read it. I've done it. I've got it out of my system. Anything else is a bonus. And if you think it's got potential to do well, then put some muscle behind it. But don't stress over it, because it could drive you around the bend. So that's really you have to adopt that kind of attitude with it, because otherwise it's going to become something that weighs you down rather than lifts you up. And it should lift you up.
It's more of a sort of an entrepreneurial process as well, isn't it? I mean, you go from. Obviously, I've not been traditionally published as you have, but my understanding is that you can focus a lot more on being a writer. Whereas if you go down the self-publishing route, you even if you don't perform each individual task yourself, you'll be in a position where you need to. You need to find somebody with those skills to do it for you. So you become not just the writer, you become the marketing department, you become the sales department. You've really got to drive all these, various different things.
And if you're not a natural entrepreneur, you tend to be doing it a bit like Charlie Chaplin might do it. You're just sort of falling around all over the place. So you're sort of you're kind of. For instance, when Mad Bad and Dangerous came out, a lot of traditional promotion was still just as popular. So, for instance, I got a load of flyers done for Mad Bad and Dangerous near Christmas time, and I would travel to all the major railway stations in London, like Euston, Waterloo, Victoria, etc. And I would go into the Smiths on those stations, and I would go and look at the magazines, music magazines, that had other flyers. Inside, these magazines get flyers inside them all the time. They call them inserts. They call them, and I would slip my, professionally printed flyers, which I had designed as well by a friend of mine, and they got them printed, and art director friend of mine, and I would slip them in amongst the ones that were officially there. So I was occupying the same ground as these people that had paid lots of money to have these distributed in magazines all around
Well,
the country.
I was going to say, I'd
So-
probably caveat this and say to people, not necessarily something that would be recommended. I'm not sure what the legality of this would be.
Well, I
but
did.
it's,
I tried
it's
to
a cracking
investigate
story.
that. I did get caught once at Euston, putting my flyers amongst others, and the guy just said, well, "Could you please just take them all out again? Just take them out." So I did. They didn't try and do it. I mean, basically, if you're furtively looking at a magazine, trying to slip something inside it, they normally think you're trying to steal it. So the people look over like they're sort of looking at you, you know. All you're doing is putting something inside it. But the thing is, you're not stealing. What you're doing is you're actually taking a bit of space, a tiny bit of space away from someone else's potential space that they would pay for. So it's a bit of an odd one. I don't know if there is any law
It's
against
probably
it.
a really grey area.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I wouldn't
I remember you
recommend-
telling me that story.
Yeah, I mean, it's embarrassing, to be honest. You know, it can be embarrassing. But
Yeah.
I didn't do it all the time. What I wanted to do was to target railway stations and some airports even to get the news of the book on a journey to another city. So basically, I could get that flyer all the way to someone who lives up in, you know, Birmingham or whatever, you know, or down on the south coast. So people look at it and think, oh, yeah. So I think that must have done it good. I did notice that Mad, Bad and Dangerous at Christmas time goes up the charts.
Yes.
People buy it as a Christmas present, and in the summer people buy it to read on holiday. But with, of course, Take Cover being about experiences as a cover teacher in schools, there aren't really any magazines where that would be appropriate to put that in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't think I'd do that now because it's an embarrassing way to behave, to be honest, to be furtively messing about in magazines in Smiths.
Yeah.
But the thing is about Take Cover is that I'm encouraged by the fact that some people who've read it have said they have been very complimentary about it, but it does have a wider audience than the Drummer's Book because I've discovered that some teenagers want to read it as well. So because they're saying, God, that's what it's like to be a cover teacher. Wow, I never thought what it would be like, you know, to be standing up there in front of us all, you know. And in a sense, it's readable by anybody who has a child at school, or who is a teacher or a cover teacher, or who is a student. So that's a lot of people. But the problem is getting them to know about it, and that is actually much harder if you're not traditionally published. But the point is, if I waited to be traditionally published, it may never have happened, and someone else might have done it before me. So that's why I decided to go ahead and do it, and see what the results would be. But I am going to be getting some flyers done, and hopefully perhaps put them in legitimately in relevant places. But and you can't just put posters up anywhere now like you used to be able to in 1979. I mean, you could fly post. My band, since Cyborg in the Chairs, used to fly post around Watford at 1 a.m. with paste and glue and stuff, and whatever. You can't do that now. I mean, it's for a start. There was no CCTV. And a policeman. I think a policeman came up to us once and said, "What are you doing putting those posters on this bus stop?" And we'd say, "Oh, we're fans of the band. We're fans of the band. Not we are the band. We're fans of the band." He said, "Well, just go home." He didn't even say take it down. Just go home. Nowadays, there's no way you could get away with doing that. So that's why the online process is very, very much a necessary one, because you can't just go and do what you want, put posters up and flyers wherever you like. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I mean it's a big economy nowadays, isn't it? I mean the social media platforms that are like Facebook, that's what they trade on. They trade on the data that they have on their users.
Yeah.
And they use it for targeted advertising. So it's become so much of a commodity nowadays that if you're seen to be trying to do it for free, it's almost more of a it's more of a shocking
Yes,
thing.
that's right.
Anyway, you've touched a little bit already on the technical side, but I think what people may be interested to know is, what does that involve? What kind of hurdles, when you go down that route of self-publishing, what kind of hurdles are you then confronted with from a technical point of view? I mean, would you consider yourself someone that was technical, and did you find it a daunting task, knowing that process that was done in the past of typesetting and so on and so forth, and getting these printed up, was now going to be something that you were going to need to be looking after?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously you don't worry about that at all if you're traditionally published. Well, it's largely thanks to you that I was able to do that, because I would simply, without the process that you introduced, I would probably have just clicked on the yes button on Amazon and got them to go ahead and do it. And as you said to me, you don't have any control over it then, whereas the way that we've done it, you have absolute control over it.
Well, I think the thing is that, just for the benefit of anyone listening, is there's really, in my mind, there's two ways to go about self-publishing, two really feasible ways.
Yeah.
And the first way is that you find a self-publishing company that has that can offer the services that you need. And so they'll do things like, essentially what they're going to do for you is they're going to, for conversations that I've had with others that have gone down this route, what they're going to do for you is they're going to take a Word file, if indeed it's Microsoft Word that you're using, they'll take a Word file, they may take a PDF file, and they'll use that to create the print book. Now, the interesting thing about that, just to jump in there on that one, is that as you know now, as we discovered as we took you through that process of getting that book on Amazon, once you have that PDF, the process is a 5 minute. Well, it's not a 5 minute job, but it's a couple of hours tops.
Yeah.
And then the other thing they'll do for you is they'll take that Word file that you've given them, and they'll create an ebook. And that the real shocking thing for me, having spoken to others that have gone down this process, is that quite often what this company will be doing is they'll be hitting a button on a piece of word processing software. Excuse me, take a breath. They'll be hitting a button on a piece of word processing software that will do a conversion, and it converts it. So, to those that don't know, an ebook is essentially, it's just a set of HTML files, which is the same as what you would find on a website. And by arranging them in a certain way, and then you do a little bit of processing on the file to compress them down into an EPUB or a .mobi file, which is for Kindle. But that's underlying it all is essentially just that HTML, and the process that some of them do, which I'm quite shocked by, having never gone through this process myself and spoken to others, I'm very shocked by, is that they hit a conversion button on their word processor to turn it into HTML, which we discussed, didn't we, at the beginning? And I've had a go at doing this myself.
Yeah.
You get some really, really bad results doing it that way.
Yeah, like the
and
text.
They're charging hundreds of pounds to do it.
The text getting hidden in the binding and all that sort of stuff.
Text goes into, well, on an ebook, a lot of the time you'll get, if you've got any images, they go into a weird place. Sometimes the text is formatted oddly. You're not getting the indentations that you want at the right time. The biggie doing a conversion particularly for Kindle, I think it's for Kindle, is the one that really has issues with this. Is if you want to have your chapter titles as you would find them in a book, which of course, I mean, it's all about making that quality product, isn't it? And having that ebook that looks really nice, and it, you don't feel like that you're in any way a second-class citizen because you've gone down the ebook route and rather than the print book route. But you'll get, if you do a conversion, you'll get chapter titles that start right at the beginning of the top of the page, as opposed to with a print book where they're sort of 75, they're about 30% of the way, 25% of the way down the page is where they start. So it's just, to me, it's one of those things that it really gripes me when I see people that have gone down that route of spending. In some cases, I know people that have spent £500, £600, and I have to break to them that's something they probably could have done by
Yes.
themselves
Yeah.
in a few minutes.
Yeah.
The other side, the other option, of course, is to do it yourself. But one thing that I'm sort of trying to advocate amongst those that I know that are going down the self-publishing route is to say to them, look, find someone that's got the skills. If you're going to spend the money with one of those people that can do it for you. They can, at the end, they can produce an actual real ebook that's properly formatted. Sorry, I don't want to go too much into the technical side, but with a properly formatted ebook, every chapter is a separate HTML file, and it loads into the e-reader just that in a much nicer way, a much quicker way. So find someone that can actually do that for you, rather than just dump you with this massive HTML file that doesn't even look that great.
Yeah.
Doesn't load that great onto your ebook. Get someone that can do it that way. Get someone that can do the formatting of the print book for you, do the typesetting, because again, these guys that are charging lots of money, in many cases, they're not actually doing that for you. And then making people aware that at the end of that process, once you have done all the stuff that you probably would have had to do anyway,
Yeah.
the process of actually uploading it onto Amazon. Again, if you need to find someone that you can use as maybe like a bit of a consultant that can help you through the process, that's fine. But that process at the end is the easy bit. The bit that those guys are doing, that charging all this money for, that bit they do at the end is the easy bit, which is just uploading to Amazon. Because I found it quite a smooth process. I don't know how you found it, Spike.
Well, basically the I just literally one day I went on the computer and there it was on Amazon as an ebook and as a print book. So it was just there. You know, it can't, I imagine the quality of the ebook is a benchmark for the printed version, for the the physical book, and it was just like overnight. But that's largely thanks to you. But it literally just happened. But I mean, when I first saw the initial ebook text and that, it just looked great. It just looked like it looked spot on, really. And of course the physical book now looks like a proper. I mean, it is a proper book. You know, there's nothing about it that you would say is faulty. And you don't lose text as I say, off the page or anything like that. It's just really nicely done, like any book, So
the quality of print on demand is startlingly high now, isn't it? It is really, really very good.
Yeah. So, and I mean, Amazon are very good. They do. If you use Amazon Prime, they will certainly get the book to you quicker than you expect. If you want to order promotional copies, I've done a few of those. And it comes to you very quickly, and they deliver very, very quickly to people who order the print book. They do get them quite quickly. They say they give you a date by which it will arrive, and very often it's a bit before that. It's never late, so it's to be recommended. But as you say, what I would say is not to be recommended is spending lots of money on companies that just prey on the fact that you really want to see your work in print. So they charge you lots of money to make you feel good about it, and then don't actually do what you could. All they're doing is what, as you say, you could do yourself, or pay somebody else to do it. A lot less money, but to do it properly. So as you say, the Amazon bit is just the last bit, and they're by the time you've done that. They just go through a process they're well used to doing, hundreds of times a day. So that's kind of like,
And if you then decide that you don't want to use their services, you want to move somewhere else. This is certainly what I've understood from others, is that that's it. You're for want of a better word, you're stuck.
Basically, you can take your self-published work. If you do it the way that we've done it, anywhere you like. I mean, if you're lucky enough for it to be noticed by a large distributor or even a publisher, you're perfectly at liberty to start again with them. If they see a future in your book and they want to invest their efforts into it, then you can do that. You don't have to. There's no obligation to Amazon at all, whatsoever.
Yeah.
You can even use the same published book and just let a distributor do a deal with you or a publisher. It can stay on Amazon if you like. Doesn't matter. You haven't got to redo it, or you can redo it if there's things about it you want to change. You can do that, or you can start again if that's what a publisher or a distributor will insist upon if they pick up on you. And if they don't, you've got it on Amazon and you can promote it yourself. So you're not tied in to anything. You're open to any opportunities that might arise. You can take them. You don't have to restrict yourself at all. That's why that's partly what attracted me most to this. Really, was it doesn't tie you into anything. So you can go down any other road you want anytime you like.
So what's the future then? What have you got coming up? You've got this book out now. Are you looking? You've mentioned Mad, Bad and Dangerous 2. Is that where you're focusing next?
I do want to finish that, but there's a couple of other things I want to do as well. There's a very bizarre children's story that I have written with a friend of mine, which all started back in the civil service. It's a rhyme. Mm-hmm. It's rhyming couplets. And I used to send silly notes to people in the civil service, normally out of boredom, really, and they would reply. And I just wrote a couple of verses to this very strange tale that I got in my head at random. And I just sent it to my friend, Tom, in the civil service. And it said, up and down the camel went to watch the fishes fry. Halfway down his fourth descent, a wizard asked him why. Why do you jump to watch the fish? The purple wizard asked. It seems to me so very cruel to watch them breathe their last. And the rest of it, there's 49 verses to this now, I think. And I sent it to him, and he really liked it. He wrote a couple of verses back. Then we left it for 40 years, or 35 years, or whatever, and got back to it. Said, should we finish that? Yeah, let's finish that. So basically, it's the story of gratuitous observation of something horrid happening, because it's just a bit of a cruel way to behave. So the wizard keeps asking this camel, why are you doing it? Why are you wasting your time watching these fishes fry on the rock? Watching them suffer. It's all done in rhyming couplets, but I'll tell you how it all comes out. And the camel refuses to talk to him. He refuses to explain himself. So the wizard gets really frustrated about this. Eventually the camel says, what business is it of yours to tell me what to do? It's not illegal. I'm perfectly at liberty to watch these fish if I want to jump up and down and watch them. It's got nothing to do with you. You're just being an advocate for a way to behave that I don't agree with. So the wizard, they have this argument for quite a while, and the wizard just takes the law into his own hands. He gets very, very frustrated, so he zaps his wand at one of the camel's humps, which bursts. So the gods intervene and say, sorry, you can't do that. That's taking the law into your own hands. You're banished from this land for 24 years. So the wizard is banished. He comes back after 24 years, and he sees the camel's not learned anything at all. He's still jumping up and down watching the fishes fry. So he says, have you learnt nothing? I'm allowed back now. Have you learnt nothing in the last 24 years? He said, it's still none of your business. He said, have you learnt nothing? You're going to take the law into your hands again and burst my other hump? So anyway, these conversations carry on. Eventually, there's a kind of a big clap of thunder, and there's a storm erupts. The wizard hides in some bushes, and then as it subsides the next morning, he comes out of the bushes, and he sees the camel sobbing. He says, maybe at last he's seen sense. He's a sense of remorse. He's regretting what he's been doing. And he goes up and says, in rhyming couplets, he asks him if he's seen sense. What's the matter? He says, oh no, I just stubbed my toe on the rocks. So he carries on jumping up and down, watching the fishes fry again. And eventually, the wizard has a go at him so much that the camel says, look, okay, right, if you must know, I store all my remorse, regret, sense of guilt, all that sort of thing, all those emotions, I store them in my remaining hump. That's where they were in the first place. I store all those negative emotions there so that I can happily jump up and down and watch the fishes fry. So the wizard said, well, look, okay, I can understand that, but doesn't that make life a bit frustrating? Because all the time you're doing something which you secretly know is probably not very nice, because you've hidden away all the feelings that are designed to persuade you not to do it. So you must be feeling some sort of guilt. Wouldn't life be nice if you didn't have to jump up and down and watch the fishes fry? So eventually he talks the camel round, who decides that, okay, all right, I'll release all these pent-up feelings of guilt and frustration and anger or whatever, So he concentrates ever so hard, and there's this rumbling happens. And the wizard is quite scared now. Suddenly this hump bursts open, and all the camel's remorse and regret and despair all come flying out. And he's a much happier individual, and they sort of celebrate, pat each other, whatever, The wizard says, "Oh, my work is done here. I must leave this place." And he says, "No, hop onto my humpless back, and I'll take you to a land where you've never seen before." So they become friends. And the newly revived camel, with his full set of emotions in place, rides off into the distance with the wizard on his back. And just at the end, the wizard looks around back at the land that this all happened in, and he can see a camel jumping up and down near some rocks, watching some fishes fry in the distance, and a yellow wizard hanging around nearby, presumably asking him why.
Yeah.
So the moral of that is, if you can live life with a kind of allowing all your emotions to prevail, but kind of balance, it's better than living life full of guilt and remorse, etc. But remember, some things never change, and you're always going to have to learn lessons. So the human race won't suddenly evolve to be people who just don't have these problems. They're all going to have them, and they're always going to need wizards to ask them why, and to persuade them to become more open as people. So the camel and the wizard and the fish is an absurd combination, but it ended up being something which had a kind of moral behind it, not just for young people, but for anybody really. But it's also completely bizarre, and I wanted to get that illustrated and have that in book form, but because my friend Tom and I, who've written it, would love to see what it looked like and how it came across. It's totally bizarre, but it's something we've always wanted to do. So that's something. The Camel's Hump, it's called, by the way. The Camel's Hump.
Okay.
And that's something I'd like to do alongside the Mad, Bad and Dangerous 2 as well. And there's a couple of other projects as well, which I won't go on about now. But there's a lot I want to do. But that's why I'm so grateful to you for enabling Take Cover to take place, because I now have a way of doing it, whereas before I had no idea. So I would say, like you say, I would say to anyone who's thinking of self-publishing, to 100% do it, but do it the right way. Don't spend loads of money on companies that say they'll take it all on, because you might end up coming unstuck. Do it the way that we've done it, which means that you do maintain control over it, and it doesn't really cost you any money. And you're not tied into Amazon. If any book that you produce, whatever, is taken up, is lucky enough to be taken up by a large organisation, distributor, publisher, whatever, you're perfectly within your rights and free to take advantage of any other opportunities that arise. And in the meantime, your book is still on Amazon. It's still in view, and you can market it any way you like. Except you can't put posters up in the middle of the night anymore.
I'll put them in magazines. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
That's superb, Spike. We'll call it a day there.
Okay.
I think that's that's pretty good. I think people are going to find that really interesting. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For joining us, and I'm certainly excited to see what you'll be doing in the future.
Great.
So thank you.
Thank you.